So I'm joined today by former FBI Special Agent Jeff Harp, who has spent the majority of his career analyzing national security threats and complex criminal networks. Mr. Harp, thank you so much for joining me today.
Sure, no problem.
So the main headline that is across the media with regards to Iran right now is the FBI bulletin. Obviously, the FBI had announced that at one point or another, Iran, in their terminology, was aspired to conduct a surprise attack on United States soil using drone strikes. Now, starting off, how realistic is this threat? And is it within the realm of possibilities for Iran to conduct this attack, given the current resources at their disposal?
Well, that's a great question. One of the things that I always like to point out when talking about Iran is the fact it is the largest state sponsor of terrorism. I read through the memo. The things that come to my mind is that, we look at the very first bombing campaign that took place in June. The months, days, and weeks leading up to that, all of the FBI investigations with respect to Iranian activity were scrubbed to make certain that the FBI and the intelligence community knew what those folks were doing who were involved in those investigations. I've had some people ask me, well, this was, they got this information in February. Why is it just now coming out? There's a lot of things that go into the bulletin, level of confidence, reliability, imminent threat. All these things are looked at before this information is even disseminated.
Does the intelligence community believe that Iran would limit these attacks to places like military bases, or would they also target civilian infrastructure like ports, refineries, and power grids, things to that effect?
Yeah, I think what you got to look at is what's the most likely target and the easiest target. They're not going to look for complex targets that are heavily guarded. And especially whenever a bulletin like this comes out, you're going to see that military installations, government facilities are more closely watched. The other thing that happens is you're going to see that, regular civilians are going to be more aware of their surroundings because now they've seen this bulletin and they're worrisome.
Given everything you've seen, just to sort of restate my question, how realistic is the threat of a foreign attack on U.S. soil?
In the complex manner that the bulletin put out, I don't think is very realistic. I think the more realistic thing is a vehicle-borne IED or something more simple, and certainly targeting soft targets, not these hardened facilities that some people think about.
When you say soft targets, what do you mean?
Well, if you think about things like, and I don't want to sensationalize and give people ideas, but when you look at places like, soccer games, football games, big festivals, mass gatherings, we recently had an attempted attack in New York where there was just a protest going on. So anytime you have a large volume of bodies present in one area without a security structure in place, then that becomes a soft target.
Sleeper cells are obviously a huge concern of the U.S. government and the intelligence community. It almost sounds like you're intimating that would probably be a more likely threat than an international attack. Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah, I would say that's accurate. When you start talking about sleeper cells, that's it. It's a terminology that a lot of people like to throw out there for unknown people that, may be posed as a threat and an attack. If you look back some of these recent attacks we've had where, they talk about the lone wolf, people who are self-radicalized in their own homes. Sleeper cells simply just mean that there is a possibility that people have come across the border or here presently. They did come here legally and they've been either radicalized on their own or they're part of a group and they're waiting for some sort of command and control notification that makes them go operational.
Are there any holes in the U.S.'s national security system that should cause civilians concern?
Well, I don't want to say there's holes, but there's always the idea of was information shared quick enough? Was it shared with the right resources? And I think there's a balancing act that goes on there. Certainly when you talk about national security investigations that are utilizing sophisticated, sensitive techniques. How do we share this information without compromising our sources and methods?
Bulletin uses some pretty interesting language. It says that Iran aspired to conduct an attack on U.S. soil in the event that the U.S. would strike Iran. Now that's happened. And it says that it would be a surprise attack. But if we struck Iran and they struck us back, that sounds retaliatory. That That doesn't sound like a surprise attack. So what does the language tell you about how the FBI is perceiving this threat?
Well, what I think it's telling me is the fact that they are unclear as to the credibility and the reliability of the source of information. Certainly, when these bulletins go out, they look at that. They look at what is the level of credibility with the source. And it's actually graded before it goes out: low, medium, high level of credibility or confidence level. And if you have a high confidence level, that's, a lot of times that comes from a human source that's got, past history of reporting things reliably, or it comes from signal intelligence or electronic eavesdropping. So there's a whole lot of things that go into it.
Given the United States defense system, how would it be possible for them to conduct an international attack on U.S. soil? Given the technology at our disposal, are there not radars that detect this? Do we not have things that can intercept these drones?
Yeah, and I think that's one thing that sort of is misleading when people start looking at these bulletins and sensationalizing, oh my God, what could happen? They look at these drones and they think about the military battlefield where we are using sophisticated drones and predators and things like that, and we see where the Iranian manufactured drones are being used over on the battlefield in Ukraine. That's not what I think that the biggest concern is here. Do they have that capability? Well, think about that. They would have to have something that would deliver that device to American soil without being tracked and without people noticing. It's an unlikely event. The more likely event is they would use simplistic devices such as hobby drones, which are pretty sizable now, and you can use those for a variety of nefarious reasons. And I think that's the bigger concern that I would have.
Why wouldn't they plan an attack in, say, New York of all places, where there are a lot of politicians, there's Wall Street?
Yeah, and they very well could. And that's what I mean when you start thinking about these sleeper cells. These people don't congregate in one place, and they're often dispersed throughout the U.S. I'll go back to 9/11, and I did a lot of work on those investigations, working at counterterrorism FBI headquarters. We tracked those folks all across the U.S., different flight schools all around the U.S., and they didn't just participate in one place, because now you start raising the level of suspicion. I don't think that you can isolate and maybe point out that California is the only place, but California is a place where largest state with a whole lot of people.
There is a nuclear power plant in San Luis Obispo. It's the Diablo Canyon nuclear power plant. Would that be, and it kind of goes back to my question earlier, but would that be a target for Iran here? And how heavily guarded would that be?
All of our nuclear facilities could be a target, but you got to think about how difficult it would be to penetrate something like that, and how large of a device it would take to get close enough to a facility like that to cause damage. It's not likely.
Mr. Harp, you've been absolutely fantastic. I've just one more question for you.
Sure.
How worried should the American people be while we're going through a conflict such as this one?
I think the American people should just be aware. And I think we go back to the same adage we had post 9/11. If you see something, say something, report it to law enforcement, and allow law enforcement to do their job to work out and to determine whether the threat's real or not.
Mr. Harp, thank you so much for joining me.
Sure, no problem. Thank you.
I do have to interject here and just mention that White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt has said that ABC News should retract this story, calling it false, and saying that this post and story should be immediately retracted by ABC News for providing false information to intentionally alarm the American people.